All right, here's our panel. The former Democratic presidential candidate and former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, and the former Democratic presidential candidate whose foundation, Humanity Forward, recently launched an initiative to provide people with $1,000 a month for 3 months, Andrew Yang.
Hey,
Wow.
Bill. It's great to see you. Pete, it's great to see you too.
Yeah.
Same here. Good to be
I
back.
saw you. We were beaming together for
Yeah.
something not that dissimilar.
No, I'm so excited to have both you guys on and together, sort of. And I guess the last time most Americans saw you, previously on Real Time, it was the debates, and you guys were on the debate stage. And now we're heading into the presidential debates and vice presidential debates. I got to ask first about this debate thing. It's just a terrible way to do it, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't really advance anybody's knowledge of anything except who can come up with zingers and put downs, and whoever is the winner is not the winner on substance. I think we just got to find a different way to do it, and I really am not looking forward to these debates because I don't think it favors what Biden is selling, which is substance. Anybody?
Well, I called the debates a reality TV show at some point during the debates, and I said it was one reason why Donald Trump became president in 2016. So TV was an innovation in the 60s, and we started having these televised debates, which ended up changing politics. And media and technology have advanced a long way since the 60s. We should have a different modern day debate that takes advantage of the fact that you can ask someone a question and then get an answer, and you could compare them side by side in a debate setting, essentially by playing clips back like the New York Times did. I think there are many interesting things we could do to compare candidates on the substance instead of turning it into a zinger match, to your point, Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, you definitely felt that pressure all the time to just come up with good television, which may or may not have shed any light. But I'll say, if there's ever a time for these things to change, it's now. I mean, you look at the conventions, the same thing. Conventions have been roughly the same since the 50s, and now we're being reimagined. I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way conventions used to look, even after the pandemic. And it will be good to see what we can come up with this time that might just update that entire setup to make it meet the reality.
And to the point that debates are really a bunch of bullshit. I mean, we see that the vice presidential candidate now is Kamala Harris, who I think is a terrific choice. I'm guessing you guys do too. But
Absolutely.
I mean, her big debate moment was saying some stuff that was good television about the guy who she's now running on the ticket with, which is all forgotten because, again, it was all just theater and nobody really cared. Okay, my next question. I don't want to do what the Fox News and I must say sometimes the MSNBC people do, which is just ignore news that your team doesn't want to hear. And so Trump did a good thing, or somebody in his administration did. Big news today. Israel has had treaty with an Arab country, the United Arab, I'm sorry, the UAE, the Emirates. That's Dubai, right? That's places where lots of people go for vacation now. I mean, there's some pretty highfalutin stuff going on in that part of the world. That's on the Gulf. Of course, Trump lied and he said it's the first treaty Israel has had with an Arab country. That's not true. They made one with Egypt, which has stayed for a very long time. Jordan has stayed for a very long time. This is, to quote Joe Biden, a big fucking deal. Or maybe it isn't. Well, I'll ask you, what do you think? You think this is a big deal?
I think it's good news. I mean, there's no question that it's good news, and we shouldn't let politics get in the way of that. It'll be especially important to see if there's real follow through on this backing off of talk around annexation, because that would have really destroyed any chance of a two-state solution. So hard to tell as usual what role or credit is appropriate for the president. But look, anything that adds peace or stability to that region, we shouldn't be afraid to say that that's good news.
Yeah, I agree, Pete, and you spend time in the region. But when something good happens, you have to call it out, because you can't get in this trap or this mode where anything that Trump does is automatically bad. Democrats need to have a clear vision for what we want to see in the world, and anything that moves that vision closer to reality is a good thing that we should applaud regardless of who's in power when it happens.
Right. And an Arab country like that, making a treaty with Israel, exchanging ambassadors, having normal relations, and that's a Gulf state, you know, that's the first time that's happened. I think that's going to be a big deal in that part of the world. I mean, now that's three countries that are have treaties with Israel. It's happening slowly, but the normalization of Israel in that part of the world, I think, you know, it didn't happen quickly, but it's going to happen because everyone realizes it's inevitable and they're not going anywhere. All right, let me ask about the convention. Andrew, I heard today you are going to speak at it.
Yes, thank you, Yang Gang. Andrew Yang is back.
What happened there? At first you were not invited, and now you are. What was that pressure from your Yang Gang? Is that what you're saying?
I think a lot of people were disappointed that I wasn't included in the original slate of speakers. Pete was there, of course, so glad to be joining Pete and others. And you know, they made their disappointment heard, and the DNC did what I thought was the right thing, which is they announced a new slate of speakers, including me. I'm going to be there next Thursday when Joe receives the nomination. So thrilled to be a part of it, thrilled to help make the case for Joe and Kamala as who we need in the White House.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear you two guys, it's like, why can't America have that now? You know, I get it. You're a little too young for the country, a little too new. But man, people like you guys who are just problem solvers, who want to just fix stuff and get on with it and have the energy. And not that Joe's not a good guy, and it's not because he's old, but you know, he's kind of been around a while. I don't know if he understands the technology and a lot of some of the things that you guys understand better. Anyway, we all wish him luck. I mean, we got to take care of this guy, you know.
Let's get Donald Trump out of there, and then
Yeah.
we'll have our hands full trying to solve the problems that have been building up for years.
So, I mean, Biden's ahead, but he's not, to my view, comfortably ahead, not for my comfort. I mean, Hillary was ahead by more at some point. And I just got to ask, what is your party doing against this walking disaster that you can't close the gap better than that? I read the other day 5.3 million people have lost their employer-based health insurance since COVID hit. That could be 10 million by the end of the year. Republicans never had a plan for health care, still don't. It's like, what do you think it is that keeps the Republicans so close to a party like that?
I mean, look, it's never just about policy, right? The policies of this administration are a disaster. The leadership of this administration is a disaster. We know that. But still, I think there are a lot of folks who heard a message, fraudulent though it was, a message that, you know, here is somebody who sees you and who cares about you. Now's our chance to change that. And I think, Joe Biden is really focused on making sure that we reach out, because we've got a chance to draw more people into the Democratic Party than I think we've had at any point in my lifetime, precisely because the way this president is acting. Federal troops being brought in a way that, or federal agents against protesters, an affront to any traditional conservative values as well as liberal values. It's a huge moment for us to grow the party. But, the reality is we should never be comfortable, no matter how good the polls get. We've got to work every day to make sure that this is a success all the way up to Election Day. And then we've also got to be ready for the fact that, on Election Day, we're probably not going to have final results. And after what we went through in Iowa, I very much know the impatience of wanting to get results on Election Day. But the reality is, if mail-in voting goes the way it should, and election officials are diligently doing their jobs, it may be days before we have results. And so we've got to be motivated all the way through that entire process.
But is your party too captured by its far left fringe? Should it talk them?
I wouldn't say that, Bill, but I will say that when I was campaigning around the country, I said, I'm running for president. And then someone would say, what party? And I said, Democrat. And you could see this negative reaction oftentimes. And this was from truck drivers or waitresses or retail clerks that I thought the Democratic Party was fighting for. And the fact that our message is not reaching certain Americans, I think the Democrats need to do some soul searching and say, why is it? Why is it that so many people think the Democratic Party isn't speaking to them, isn't fighting for them, is patronizing them? I think the Democratic Party has a tendency to deliver a message in a particular way and then say, if you don't get that message, it's your fault. Instead, we should be going to people where they are and speak to them in a way that they appreciate and understand. I think Republicans, unfortunately, get that to a higher degree than Democrats do. And as a result, we're in danger of being perceived as this urban party or the party of the educated elite. And that's what's created an opening for Republicans to make their case over the last number of years.
Right, because, I mean, economically, it does seem like you should be getting a lot more votes. I mean, and Andrew, your big proposal was $1,000 a month to everybody, which is sort of what the country has done during COVID. I read the other day that the poverty rate, we all thought it was going to go up, and it went down because everybody living or dead got a check for $1,200. And some people.
It turns out giving people money reduces poverty, Bill, and that's what we found out. And now 74% of Americans are for cash relief during this pandemic. In 2020, 74% might as well be 98%. So this is something that Americans can all see. It's common sense. We have to get more money into people's hands to allow millions of families a path forward during this time when we've lost millions of jobs and they're not coming back.
But we are just printing the money. I mean, you know, it is funny money, right? I mean, and at some point, do you not worry that at some point with funny money, the whole thing comes crashing down and then we're all poor?
Well, we need to do a better job of harnessing the gains of things like the Amazon trillion-dollar stock market valuation that right now the American people are seeing zero of. If we got ourselves our tiny fair share of the hundreds of billions being generated by Amazon and being made off of our data every year, then we can start to pay for universal basic income and other measures that are necessary in this time. But right now, the house is on fire. We have to put the fire out. And the danger is really doing too little, not too much. I'm in despair, just like millions of Americans, that our legislators went home without another stimulus deal. You know, you're looking at tens of millions of Americans who are facing eviction and desperation right now because our government could not get its act together and do the obvious in a crisis.
Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley tweeted last week, cancel student debt, cancel rent, cancel mortgage. That sounds pretty radical. Is that part of why Americans sometimes are skeptical because they think the Democrats are a little too radical? Or maybe that's not radical. What do you think? Pete?
Well, I don't think it's radical to have relief for Americans. It doesn't mean you can just wave it all away. But you know, the reality is, if we don't do something, a lot of people are soon going to be homeless. It's why, for example, we should at least extend this moratorium that exists on evictions. You know, for all the show that the president made of signing an executive order, it didn't actually do anything to provide that kind of relief. Andrew's right. The house is on fire, and we need to take extraordinary measures to bring relief to ordinary Americans. We've already done it in the form of cash. It worked, although it would have worked better if we had acted more quickly. And, you know, over time, we'll develop more ways to look out for the long run. But what we got to do right now is just make sure people don't go off the cliff.
Okay.
Now, Bill, when you talk about pushing money out to people, you know, 10 years ago or 12 years ago, we printed $4 trillion for the Wall Street banks, and Americans remember that. So you see that we have the resources when it comes to Wall Street. Now it's time for the American people to experience the same kind of, frankly, benefit that the big corporations have seen.
I'm just wondering, you know, landlords are people too. You know, I mean, my first apartment here, the guy only had 4 apartments. I don't know if you canceled all rent, mortgage. I mean, I just think it's
well, that's why I'm
for
putting money into people's hands so the landlord gets paid too, and the small business owner, and the garage, and the grocery store, and the mom and pop businesses that are going to shut otherwise.
Okay, so I read this week that Fox News is now the #1 channel in prime time, not just among news channels, among all channels. That's pretty astounding from someone who remembers when, you know, TV was like 9 channels. that among all channels, including the entertainment ones, this is what people are watching. And I think it was 63% of the people who get most of their news from Fox say that Trump has done an excellent job fighting COVID. You know, when he loses the election, if he does, these people are not going to believe it. And I remember asking probably both of you, I know I asked you, Mayor Pete, what are you going to do when he doesn't go away? And back then, everyone was laughing me off. And now, of course, everyone is kind of like saying, yeah, what are we going to do? And they've gone right to baking it into the cake that he's not going to leave. And my point was always, we need to get people on the record now. Now, you have to get the people on the record saying, this can't happen. So what are your positions on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is one of the reasons why we've got to hold his protectors and his enablers accountable. You know, one of the extraordinary things after that Lafayette Square episode, where he basically politicized the military, was that military leaders who were involved realized that that was wrong and apologized. Whether we're talking about our institutions like the military or whether we're talking about elected officials, everybody needs to make clear now that there needs to be that orderly and peaceful transition of power. You know, and a lot of people used to roll their eyes every 4 years when the inauguration's going on and the commentators talk about the transition of power because it seems so you know, something we ought to be able to take for granted. But this president doesn't care about any democratic norm. Why would he care about this one? To me, the only real solution to that is to make sure that it's not even close. An election with this president shouldn't even be within arguing distance. It shouldn't even be within cheating distance.
But shouldn't the Democratic Party be able to win by one vote, just like the Republican Party? Why are there always two rules for these two parties? We shouldn't have to win big. This is America. We should just have to be able to win. One vote should do it. Bush won by 537 in Florida, and they gave it to him. I feel like we're moving the goalpost.
Right? I mean, look, I remember being in high school, learning about the Electoral College and thinking, well, that's a quirky thing, but if it ever actually overruled the American people, I'm sure they'd get rid of it the next day. It's happened twice since then. And if we want to call ourselves a democratic country, it's got to go. Now, the only way to do that is a constitutional amendment, but there's actually a compact circulating among the states that if enough states sign on, promising to give their electoral votes to the person who wins the popular vote, it'll have the same effect. We're not going to see that happen before November. One more reason why we got to make sure it's not even close. But I do think these kinds of structural reforms that I made the case for in my campaign, whether it's the Electoral College, whether it's making sure that our fellow Americans, U.S. citizens in D.C., get a senator, making sure that Puerto Rico gets real political representation, or you know, some of the other basic reforms that we got to do to our system and our courts. If we don't do that, then we're always going to be chasing our tail with election results that just don't reflect what the American people actually believe.
Yeah. Are either of you concerned about QAnon? If people don't know what that is, they're a crazy conspiracy theory group. They're the ones who think that Hillary Clinton was running a pedophile sex ring out of a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's on that level. And now, you know, it started on the internet, then it migrated, of course, to right-wing radio and stuff like that. And now we're seeing people, QAnon people, in Congress. Someone won the primary in Georgia. There's going to be a Republican congresswoman who's a QAnon person. They believe a satanic ring of you know, pedophilia fans are running the world, and reptilians and stuff like that. What do we do about that, or can we do anything about that?
Well, one feature of the internet and the way people are getting information now, Bill, is that negative sentiment and conspiracy theories now spread more virulently and effectively. Where if you remember, and you and I are old enough to remember the days before the internet, if you had someone with some crackpot theory, they couldn't find someone else, you know, like they were in the town square,
right,
or whatnot. But now they can connect with each other, and this is a feature. This is here to stay. This is something that we need to get our arms around as a society, because it's going to get worse when you have deep fakes and you're able to present compelling videos of you, me, and Pete doing things that we never did. And there's going to be this real question of what is truth? in that kind of era, especially now when we're all sort of interacting via video. I mean, we take this video as truth and we're having this conversation, but then, you know, if there, you can present another video that says something else. So this is something that to me is fundamental to a functioning democracy, that we are decades behind the curve in terms of regulating or figuring out or governing what the rules are in terms of hate speech online, in terms of formation of various online communities. And it's getting more and more dangerous over time. It's only going to continue to get more dangerous as time goes on.
I think there's one other thing. I agree with all of that. I think there's one other thing going on. Look, the conspiracy theories are actually nothing new. I mean, you can go all the way back to the 1790s and find conspiracy theories about the Illuminati. It's just something that's part of America. What's unusual is for it to have this much power, for a conspiracy group to have an ally in the White House or a member in Congress. But I think part of the appeal, especially right now, these groups, if you just look at the way they work, their little codes and stickers and logos, is they're offering a kind of membership. I think they're speaking to a sense of belonging that people are looking for anywhere they can find it.
Yep.
And if we don't build real sources of community, including, you know, right around us at a local level, then really dark and creepy and harmful things will come in to fill that void. And I think we're seeing that right now.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Hey, I look forward in the years to come to watching you two guys fight it out with each other for the presidency.
Me and Pete have a pact. Don't worry about it, Bill.
Oh, like an alliance?
Well, I'm on the Yang Gang.
Okay. Whoever wins, I don't think we can lose. Thank you, guys. See you soon.
Stay well, Bill.
All right.
Good seeing you, Bill. Great seeing you. Take care. We'll do.